Today we're going to take an inside look at the Lamborghini Huracan Super Trofeo Evo 2. This car competes in the IMSA Super Trofeo series, and this particular car I co-drive with my good friend Paul Nemschoff. The Huracan is powered by a V10, making over 630 horsepower. It's mated to a 6-speed gearbox, transaxle. This particular car actually does come with a clutch pedal, unlike most modern GT cars. When you enter the car, you're going to see a nice form-fitting cockpit with a couple different seat inserts, one for Paul and one for myself, just so I can reach the pedals, as he is quite a bit taller than I am. The steering wheel itself is not unlike most GT cars, with a lot of buttons and knobs. From left to right, the radio button is our gateway to communicating with our team. The drink button has a water pump that you can pump water through your helmet system. The flash button is simply there to make sure your headlights flash in succession to let the drivers ahead of you know that you really want to get them the hell out of the way. You have a neutral button, which we actually use quite a bit, as you cannot engage gear without holding the neutral button and selecting the upshift, and you can't get it into neutral without doing the same in reverse. Neutral button down to neutral. The wiper button is there just for that. It's for your windshield wipers. Pit speed limiter in the top right. The pit speed limiter is very important, as we do require pit stops in all of our races. You have to make sure that that pit speed limiter is activated as you come into the pits and doesn't deactivate until after you've crossed the pit speed limit line, or you'll incur a pretty big penalty. The alarm button you see there is just to clear alarms that may show up on the dash. Things like high water temperature, oil pressure, or fuel, all will show up as an alarm and you can clear it. If it gets to a point where you can't clear it, it's something that really needs to be addressed. The page button cycles through the dash that's ahead of you, and the reverse button is the only way you can actually engage reverse in this car. Once it's in neutral, the same applies to getting in first gear. You have to have clutch in, neutral button selected, and then the downshift to get it into the reverse gear. Each Super Trofeo is outfitted with a Motec dash unit. This tells you what gear you're in, what your RPM and shift lights are going to be. Some are fitted with tire pressure monitoring system, but it monitors all your oil and water temperatures and fuel pressures so that you can see if there's any warnings that come up. It'll also give you what TC and ABS setting that you're in, as well as your lap times and a predictive lap timer that comes in very, very handy. Mechanics can use that page button on the steering wheel to cycle through a mechanics page. This gives them all of the vital information of the engine as it's running while they are in the warm-up process. Now, the center knobs on the steering wheel are both the ABS setting and the TC settings. That's anti-lock brake systems, which keep the car from locking up all four wheels under hard braking. And we have a variety of different settings for that. And the traction control settings, which keep the car from having too much wheel spin under hard acceleration. These settings come in handy, and you can turn them all the way off. We typically run with a little bit of assistance from the electronics that compute. But in really tough conditions like rain or slippery conditions that like hot weather that the tires are really wearing out, we tend to lean on the TC settings a little bit higher. The blue Race Logic unit that's right to the right of the dash, we use this as a pit lane timer. As we cross the pit in, the timer begins, and it lets us know once we do a driver change that we're not going to go under or over our allotted time within the pits and incur a big penalty. Just above that is IMSA's Delphi light system. This light will flash when in the event of a red flag or a full course caution and inform you immediately that there's a problem and you need to slow down and there's no passing, and to wait further instructions. To start the car, you're going to need the master switch on and the ignition and starter. To the right of that start button is your chill out system. This powers on, and when you wear a chill out shirt, it'll pump a cooling agent through tubes throughout the shirt to keep your core temperature down. While typically I don't use the chill out shirt or system, I will use the helmet blower located right next to it. As soon as I'm in the car, I attach the helmet blower system to my helmet, flip that switch up to cool so I can get nice cool fresh air pumped into my helmet throughout my stint. The rest of the buttons on the main console are pretty self-explanatory. You have your lights, You have an interior blower that blows air throughout the cockpit. Auxiliary lights, there's a 60 button. That 60 button is used mainly in Europe for slow zones, 60 kilometers per hour. Then you've got your rain light. The rain light is there to flash a red light repeatedly at the back of the car, so when it's raining outside, other people can see you while you're in front of them. The screen heater, also used in wet weather conditions, is to keep this windshield from fogging up. The power steering button is a button you can use while moving the car around while the engine's off, and it will kick on the electric power steering so it's easy to steer the car. Main pump 1 and auxiliary main pump are all fuel pump switches that automatically come on when you fire the car up. You've got your turn signals using the left and right green arrows, and the fault button I've never had to use, and I probably should know what it means. That's my fault. The green switch below, or the knob below, is a brake bias adjuster. Turning it clockwise will give you more front brake bias. Turning it counterclockwise will give you more bias to the rear. The big red button that says push is not something we ever want to have to push, because that's our fire system. You push that and it's gonna spray fire retardant material all up in your face and all throughout the car. It is not something that we want to use, but in the event of an emergency, it's something we may have to. If you notice the exterior of this car, you're gonna see carbon on top of carbon on top of carbon inlays throughout. From the rear wings to all the body panels, front splitters, and even the dive planes are all made out of carbon fiber to make it strong and light. In the engine bay of the car is a 630 plus horsepower V10 with gobs of torque, mated to a 6-speed transaxle gearbox. The Super Trofeo typically has a little more horsepower, almost 100 more, than the GT3 competitors that are also on track on the same weekend. While the Super Trofeo has a little bit less downforce and a little bit heavier weight, it is probably one of the fastest straight line speed cars on IMSA weekends.